you've spoken to multiple detectives involved in the Nancy Guthrie case. Anybody that is arrested and taken in, they are being questioned on whether or not they know anything about the Nancy Guthrie case.
I have talked to a couple of detectives, and they told me that's exactly what they're doing. When you come across a suspect, you can't let anybody go unless you've perfectly ID'd them. You just don't want to have your career ruined by looking back and saying, I'll talk to the bad guy and I'll let him go.
I was just told that everybody that's currently being arrested in Tucson and taken in is being questioned on whether or not they know anything about the Nancy Guthrie abduction. You are about to see an interview that I conducted with Robbie Mayer. Now, he's a former detective with the Pima County Sheriff's Office, the same sheriff's office that's investigating the Nancy Guthrie abduction. He reveals that and more in this interview you're about to see. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Let's get right into it. We have nearly reached the 4-month mark since Nancy Guthrie was abducted, and I think the question that's on the top of everybody's mind right now is the Pima County Sheriff's Department or the FBI closer to furthering this investigation or finding the person that did this? Well, joining me today is Robbie Mayer. He's a former detective with the Pima County Sheriff's Department and former prosecutor. He spent over 4 decades working within the law. Robbie, I just want to thank you for joining me today. What I want to get into right now is whether or not the Pima County Sheriff's Department is equipped to handle an investigation of this scale, in your opinion. What do you think about that?
They definitely are, because they handle homicides routinely. And kidnappings are a reality in Tucson because of the closeness of the border and drugs. So these cases have worked. Now, as to whether the particular detectives in that unit had experience enough at the time, the time will tell. But there are also other experienced detectives they have in the office to go guide them if they need something. And a crime techs who handle the crime scenes, they're not detectives, but they're technicians for handling crime scenes. They have a lot of experience. They handle hundreds of crime scenes. They may have made some mistakes here or there, I don't know, but they're definitely capable. And now they have the support of the FBI. I have 13 years experience working with the FBI because I was a liaison with the FBI Bank Robbery Task Force in Phoenix. And the FBI has helped me on a couple of homicide cases and some home invasions. And I think the combination of those deputies with the experience of the FBI is inevitably going to solve this case. But the problem is cases take a long time to solve. When I was on a primetime rapist case, a serial rapist 40 years ago, they were investigating him for 3 years before it was solved. I joined during the last 5 months, and I joined with a different methodology. I went after, instead of going after one of the leads that were getting called in by the public, I went and tried to find his drug connection, which I did. It took me 5 months. So sometimes you just have to be patient. Some cases never get solved, but I think this one will, because there's a God in heaven who reveals mysteries. And this is such an abhorrent crime, kidnapping an 84-year-old woman out of her bedroom at 2 o'clock in the morning. I can't see that God is going to allow this one to go unsolved.
You said that the Pima County Sheriff's Department routinely investigates homicide cases and kidnapping cases. If the Pima County Sheriff's Department was under your leadership, how would you be handling this case right now, nearly 4 months in?
Well, I would have wanted to do the exact same thing, hook up with the FBI, because I've worked with the FBI CAST unit on a number of cases, and those guys do some brilliant things to put cases together. You know, sometimes criminals think they're smarter than the police, but they usually all make a mistake somewhere. It's like sitting in front of a field with 100,000 rocks, and you know what you're looking for is underneath one of those rocks. What determines whether you solve the case is your diligence, your perseverance. The answer is out there and it's under one of those rocks. You just have to keep turning over those rocks. But these are unique criminals. They're smart. They came prepared to that crime scene not to leave DNA and not to leave fingerprints. You could tell that by the way the man at the front door was dressed. You know, they overdressed. Now, I was in a unit that did nothing but follow burglars every day for 3 years. And I've only come across 3 cat burglars. They're and a cat burglar is someone who's willing to go into a house while while the residents are there. The burglars don't like to do that. These guys came to commit a burglary, and they came prepared not to leave evidence. So you just have to hope, sometimes when a criminal gets away with a crime and doesn't get caught immediately, it emboldens them to do more crime. So I think that these guys will get caught doing another crime. And so eventually somebody that knows them, their conscience will hopefully bother them enough to call in. And the problem is the FBI and the sheriff's department could have the suspect's name right now, but you have over 50,000 leads. And it takes a long time to get through them. One lead can take 15 minutes. The next lead may take 15 days. And when we were in a primetime rapist case, we had 4,000 leads. And one of the detectives in the primetime rapist investigation had the suspect's name in his lead that was assigned him, but he just hadn't gotten to it yet. Or I jumped the gun by looking for the drug dealer who sold him his drugs, because he would freebase cocaine while he did these home invasions. And I happened to find the right drug dealer who knew him. Now, in this case, they've got over 50,000. So I think that we just have to be patient. And because there's a lot of stress in these guys, these agents and these deputies, and it just dominates your life. But they're going to get there sometime. We just have to be patient.
In your experience, have you ever seen a case where the perpetrators were as prepared as these people, they didn't leave any DNA or any fingerprints, and it still got solved?
It's rare. There's mistakes that can get made. Like, for example, it was dressed up as Zara. What happens if they had a year to get inside the house? They were in there for 41 minutes. Why? Eventually maybe somebody may have to use the restroom and they'll make a mistake and touch the toilet or something like that inside the house. Or outside the house when they were waiting, they were obviously in those bushes for days doing surveillance of the house, I believe. And sometimes you're out there, you'll drop gum wrappers or cigarette butts. So I think they just have to give time. But I think these guys were unusual burglars because they came so prepared. I haven't seen that before. I've seen burglars wear gloves, wear masks, but these guys just appeared to me prepared not to leave any evidence, which they have so far. I mean, there may be something inside we don't know. And here's what baffles me. You're going to kidnap a person, that means you're a thief. You're in the person's house, an elderly person, they're in there for 41 minutes. And I've been led to understand that they did not steal anything from her inside the house. They didn't steal any money or jewelry. That's unusual. What were they doing in that house for 41 minutes? I assumed that they were asking her to open a safe up. They were looking at her jewelry, but now they're saying the rumor out there is nothing was stolen, which is unusual. And what were they doing?
At the beginning of the investigation, do you have any opinions on how the Pima County Sheriff's Department handled the crime scene in terms of leaving gloves on the floor, maybe not creating a perimeter around the crime scene and letting media walk up to the door and things to that effect?
I think that was a mistake. The first thing I was thinking when I heard about it and I saw an overhead video shot of the house, I was thinking, I hope you secure the perimeter in the bushes and the trees where they were probably standing or sitting watching the house, pre-surveillance. And they probably did that for a number of days. And people sit out there and do stuff like throw gum down or cigarette butts. And I was thinking, I hope they secure that. And I think I think the next day they did come back and search that. But I think that crime scene should have been more tightly controlled. But we don't know what they found on the inside. They may have found something really good on the inside, but when they should keep that secret. The FBI is really good about that, but they know stuff on the inside of this investigation that we don't know. And I think there's a lot of criticism going their way that may be unjustified in the long run. I've seen, not every crime scene is handled perfectly, but maybe a more experienced detective would have said, hey, pick up that front doormat, search the perimeter immediately. But what happened. We don't know what's in the inside. And I think what's on the inside will be what makes the case. Was there more blood on the inside? Did she scratch somebody? Who knows?
You mentioned that during your investigation in the primetime rapist case, you had over 4,000 leads, and the investigators on the Nancy Guthrie case currently have 50,000. When you're investigating those leads, Can you walk us through some of the things that you're doing to investigate those leads? Who are you calling? Are you visiting certain properties? Are you doing background checks on people? What could the investigators be doing now?
Well, if they give you a name, you're gonna do a background check on it, to see if he's got any criminal history. And then you're gonna have to look at the criminal history to see if he's done burglaries or violent crimes before. And and sometimes, that was why I was thinking it was important to see what, if anything, was stolen from the house, because burglars will pawn the jewelry they steal, and that can be traceable. And but I think other things I would be doing, I'd be talking to, if I would put a word out to every detective in the Tucson Police Department and in the Pima County Sheriff's Department. Every time you arrest somebody, ask them if they know anything about the Guthrie case. That's something I would ask all the detectives to do. And I have talked to a couple of detectives, and they told me that's exactly what they're doing. And I think that depends on, see, that we had an advantage in the primetime rapist case because we had fingerprints from two of the home invasions. There was 28 home invasions in that case. We had fingerprints from two of the homes, so we had something to compare. So one mistake that gets made sometimes in these cases is you go and talk to a suspect, and the suspect seems very friendly, and you don't like talk to him or coerce him or get a court order for DNA or fingerprints. You got to make sure everybody you come in contact with, that you get their fingerprints or their DNA. You can't leave, because I've seen in a number of investigations where detectives will come across somebody in a case, and there was one case where he saw somebody driving in the area where they thought the primetime rapist lived, and he's driving a motorcycle. We knew he was using a motorcycle. The detective ran the plate, got a name, went back to the office and checked his record, and he had priors for armed robbery, but he thought he was 2 inches off the height. We thought he was about 6 feet, and this guy, and on the record, it said he was 5'10". So he didn't submit the guy's fingerprints, and that was the primetime rapist. He missed it. And I noticed that happens on a bunch of other cases. Sometimes there was another serial rapist named the Red Baron. They sent some detectives out into a neighborhood to specifically look in a certain geographic area for suspects, and a detective came across this guy who he stopped right in the target area, and he said, what's your name? He gave him a false name. He said, where do you live? He points to his apartments. I live over there. Do you have ID on you? No, I don't have any ID on me. He let him go, thinking he was going to follow him later, and that was the Red Baron rapist. So when you come across a suspect, you can't let anybody go unless you've perfectly ID'd them. Trying to get a court order or permission, get their fingerprints or DNA, you got to be real thorough like that, because you just don't want to have your career ruined by looking back and saying, I'll talk to the bad guy and I let him go.
You just said that you have spoken to multiple detectives involved in the Nancy Guthrie case, and something they are currently doing is anybody that is arrested and taken in, they are being questioned on whether or not they know anything about the Nancy Guthrie case. Is there anything else that detectives are doing to further this investigation that you can tell us?
No, they've kept a very tight seal on this, and I don't know anybody that's in a particular that's left over. I do know people in law enforcement that will know something. I'm not going to put them in a position to ask them, but I do know that one or two guys I've talked to said, yeah, we're talking, we're asking that question, and because every police officer in the Tucson PD and every police officer the deputy on the sheriff's department, FBI agent, every FBI agent wants to solve this case, even if they're not assigned to the task force.
Mr. Mayor, you've been absolutely wonderful. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Well, thank you for spending time with me.